Hello everyone. Today I'll be dealing with vestibular system part 1, which is the functional anatomy and physiology of the vestibular system. What is equilibrium? The capacity of a body to maintain spatial orientation at rest and also during motion is known as equilibrium. What contributes to equilibrium? Our senses and our central nervous system contributes to equilibrium. It includes the visual, the auditory. Auditory includes the acoustic vestibular system plus the proprioceptive system of our limbs. Like the positioning of our limbs is relayed to our brain, and the central nervous system which correlates all the inputs. So we have peripheral systems, we have the vision, vestibular and the proprioceptive plus central. What happens when the equilibrium is lost? What is vertigo? Vertigo is defined as a data mismatch in the sensory mechanism. It can be central or peripheral. Any of the visual, acoustic, vestibular or proprioceptive inputs are not correlated and the central nervous system is not able to analyze them properly, the patient can result in vertigo. Vertigo is also defined as the hallucination of movement. That is, there is no actual movement, but the patient perceives the movement as if the patient is moving or the surrounding is moving. Coming to vestibular apparatus anatomy, the vestibular apparatus is present inside the inner ear, which is present inside the petrous part of the temporal bone. The petrous part of the temporal bone forms the outer bony covering that is known as bony labyrinth. This is the cochlea, this is the saccule, and this is the utricle and the three semicircular canal. The saccule, utricle and the three semicircular canal forms the vestibular apparatus. So the outer bony covering is known as the bony labyrinth, within which you have the membranous labyrinth. Between the bony labyrinth and the membranous labyrinth, there is a fluid known as perilymph, and within the membranous labyrinth, the fluid is endolymph. Coming to the end organs, the end organs of vestibular sensation present in the semicircular canals are known as cristae. The end organs present in the utricle and saccule is known as macula. This is a more precise image. See, in this picture you can see the location, direction of the head, and the membranous labyrinth is shown in an enlarged view with its orientation. So you have the three semicircular canal. The first one is the lateral or the horizontal semicircular canal, which is in the horizontal plane of the head, and you have two vertical canal. This is the superior canal and this is the posterior canal, which is in the vertical plane of the head. So, you have one end of the semicircular canal is dilated, known as the ampulla. The lateral or horizontal semicircular canal has an ambulated end and a non-ambulated end. The non-ambulated ends of the superior and posterior canals join together to form the crus commune. Then the utricle and saccule is visible here. Then also the vestibular nerve. The innervation of the vestibular nerve is shown here. The vestibular nerve has two divisions, superior and inferior. The superior vestibular nerve innervates the superior or anterior canal, lateral canal and utricle. The inferior vestibular nerve innervates the posterior canal and saccule. Both these nerves relate to the vestibular ganglion, which is known as a Scarpa's ganglion, which is present in the internal auditory meatus. Coming to some special anastomosis, Voigt's anastomosis is an anastomosis between the superior vestibular nerve and the antero-superior part of the saccule. That nerve is also known as superior saccular nerve. Wood's anastomosis is anastomosis between the inferior vestibular nerve and the cochlear nerve, and it carries cochlear afferents. There are anastomosis between the facial nerve and the vestibular nerve that carries parasympathetic innervations to the vestibular labyrinth. Coming to the blood supply of the vestibular system is mainly from the anterior vestibular artery and posterior vestibular artery. Like the superior vestibular nerve and inferior vestibular nerve, the anterior vestibular artery supplies the superior or anterior semicircular canal, lateral or horizontal semicircular canal, and the utricle. The posterior vestibular artery, like the inferior vestibular nerve, supplies major part of the posterior semicircular canal and saccule. Both these arteries arise from the labyrinthine artery, which is a branch of the anterocerebellar artery in 45% of cases, and posterior vestibular artery is a branch of common cochlear artery. Coming to anatomical orientation, the periphery mainly deals with measurement of accelerations, that is measurement of movements. Any molecule starting from a triatomic molecule has 6 degrees of freedom of movement. which can be measured by human vestibular apparatus. These are the movements. You know there are x, y, and z axis. So there is translation or linear movement in the x, y, and z axis is known as surge, heave, and sway. Also, there is rotational movement along the three axes: rotation along x, rotation along y, rotation along z, which is known as roll, pitch, and yaw. And these three merge together to form six components or 6 degrees of freedom of movement. Now coming to the fact that we have 2 years, we have everything is paired. Like there are 6 semicircular canals for us. So a semicircular canal with in 1 year shows synergism with the semicircular canal of the opposite ear. So they walk in a pair. Come to this picture. In this you can see the orientation of the canal. This is the horizontal plane of the head. The horizontal semicircular canal is at an angle of 30 degrees up the horizontal axis of upright head. And the horizontal canal of the right ear is paired with the horizontal canal of the left ear. This means that when in a specific movement of head, when the right side of the canal is stimulated, there is a equal inhibition of the left canal, which I'll explain in the later videos. Coming to the vertical canal, the angles of the vertical canal. This is a sagittal plane of the head. This is a sagittal plane. The angles of the vertical canal are at 45 degrees to the sagittal plane of the head. And you can see that this is the left anterior canal, left posterior canal, right anterior canal, and right posterior canal. The left anterior canal pairs with the right posterior canal. So left anterior canal, right posterior canal, they are in parallel plane known as the left anterior right posterior LARP plane. The right anterior canal pairs with the left posterior canal, that is known as right anterior left posterior RALP plane. End organ anatomy. This is the image. This is another enlarged image which we saw before itself. This is the cochlea. Here comes utricle and saccule. These are the semicircular canal. These are the dilated ends. And the dilated ends ampulla contains the end organ crista ampullaris. This is the crista ampullaris. This is another enlarged picture. So this is the ampulla. So around this ampulla you have the perilymph, and here you have the bony labyrinth. This is the endolymph. So crista ampullaris is a saddle shaped structure on one wall of the ampulla. It has a central portion that is apex, and the peripheral is known as the slope. Peripheral zones are formed by the slopes. And this crista ampullaris contains the hair cells, and there is a membranous diaphragm that extends from the crista ampullaris to the opposite side of the canal, that is known as cupula, that stretches from the crista to the opposite wall, and this is the endolymph that is inside. And there is a water seal between the endolymph and cupula, that is endolymph cannot move freely across the cupula. The specific gravity of cupula is 1. Specific gravity of endolymph is also 1. This prevents the cupula from floating upwards in certain positions of the head, causing enduring nystagmus. Disruption of this equivalence of specific gravity is likely the cause of alcohol nystagmus. Coming to utricle and saccule, they are known as otolith organs and they measure linear accelerations. As said above, the sensory epithelium organ is macula. In utricle, the macula is horizontally placed, and in saccule, it is sagittally placed. Each macula has a gelatinous matrix. This is a gelatinous matrix in this picture you can see, into which the hair cells project. And the gelatinous matrix is studded with tiny calcium carbonate granules known as otoconia. These are the otoconia which you can see. The utricle and saccule measures linear acceleration, which are caused by the translational movements of the head. It also measures tilt of the head and gravity. It also measures effects of gravity on the head. The size of the otolith, that is the calcium carbonate crystals, are around 0.5 to 30 micrometer, and most of them are around 5 to 7 micrometers. The specific gravity of the otolithic membrane is higher than endolymph, that is 2.71 to 2.94. Within the otolithic membrane, there's a central part. There's a central part known as the striola. This is the striola. The striola contains very small otoliths around 1 micrometer. This is another picture of the utricle and saccule. So the central part, this is the striola. In saccule, the macula is vertically oriented. In utricle, it is horizontally oriented. So this is this triola, and the polarization differs on both sides of this triola. The polarization of the hair cells, which I will be explaining when I explain the hair cells. So it differs on both sides of the triola. So one side, when one side is excited, the other side is inhibited. Same with the utricle. When one side is excited, the other side is inhibited. In case of semicircular canal, when one ear is excited, the other ear will be inhibited. Hair cells of the end organs. There are two types of hair cells, type 1 hair cells and type 2 hair cells. Type 1 hair cells are amphora shaped spherical nucleus. They have a calyx like afferent nerve ending. So this is the calyx. It is like a calyx or chalice covering the hair cell. So this is the afferent nerve ending. It can be simple or complex. Simple is one calyx for one afferent nerve calyx for one hair cell. This is a simple one. Complex one is when one afferent nerve calyx is surrounding 2 to 4 hair cells. That is mainly seen in the central zone and striola. Type 2 is more cylindrical and it has a butt-shaped or Boughton afferent at one end. And the apex of the cells are bathing in the endolymph. They are also surrounded by other non-sensory supporting cells and dark cells. So each hair cell has a bundle of 50 to 100 stereocilia and one kinocilium at one edge of each bundle. And the location of this kinocilium, this is very important. The location of the kinocilium relative to the stereocilia is an intrinsic polarity of the cell. So you can know that the hair cells are mainly modified columnar epithelium and they have microvilli. This microvilli are modified as stereocilia. So these are actin filaments cross-linked by fibrin and they are arranged in a hexagonal pattern and they vary in length. It is like a staircase. The smallest at one end and the length of the stereocilia goes on increasing, and the last one will be the kinocilium. The tallest will be the kinocilium. In this, it is the kinocilium is located at the tall edge of the bundle, and kinocilium is a true cilium. It has a axoneme, that is 9 paired microtubules, and sometimes there is a central pair of microtubule also. So the location of kinocilium imparts polarization to hair cell. That means this is a type 2 hair cells. As you can see, it has a Boughton type of nerve ending, and this is a normal hair cell. There will be some kind of firing, some kind of electric discharge is there in all hair cells at rest. So this is normal hair cells. And when the stereocilia are tilting towards the kinocilium, there is excitation. That is, action potentials are increased. When the stereocilia are tilting away from the kinocilium, the action potentials are reduced. So this is the normal action potential. This is when the stereocilium is bending towards the kinocilium. There is stimulation or action potentials are increased. When it is bending opposite to the kinocilium, there is reduction in the action potential. So a revision again. This is the crista ampullaris with cupula. This is the macula with the otoliths and striola. Coming to detailed functioning of the stereocilia is having transduction channels, and each stereocilia is linked to the next stereocilia with the help of tip links. The tip links are connected to the molecular gate of transduction channels. So tension in the tip links controls the opening and closing of transduction channel, and the tip links are attached to the stereocilia at a place known as insertional plate or insertional plaque. Coming to the mechanism, when displacement of the ciliary bundle occurs towards the kinocilium, there is opening of potassium channels and depolarization of the hair cell. And depolarization causes calcium influx at the basal end of hair cells, and there is increased flow of neurotransmitter synapse, that is stimulation. When there is displacement in the opposite direction, that is, the stereocilia and kinocilia are deflecting in the opposite direction of the kinocilium, there is hyperpolarization of the cell. So the orientation of kinocilia of the semicircular canal determines the excitatory direction of the canals. This is a very important part. When there is movement towards kinocilia only, there will be excitation. Another thing is the membranous labyrinth is tethered to the skull. So this is outer, you can see bony labyrinth, this is a membranous labyrinth, it is tethered to the skull. So whenever the head moves, the membranous labyrinth also should move. And also endolymph is usually a watery fluid, but it acts as a thick viscous oil in small dimensions of the semicircular canal. So it has viscosity also. Coming to physics in vestibular system, everything in vestibular system operates on based on the physics model only. Mainly we can describe regarding Newton's laws, like an object in motion will continue to stay in motion or at rest unless acted upon by a force, and this force can either change the object's direction or speed, and the force acting on an object is equals to its mass and mass times its acceleration. So we can consider that our body and head are continuously moving. Even during each heartbeat, our body and head are moving. The working principle of the semicircular canal is a torsion pendulum model. So when a canal is rotated about an axis, that is when the head is turned to one side, there are, so you know that inside the semicircular canal there is endolymph and ampulla is there. Ampulla, you have crista ampullaris is there, cupula is there, is projecting into the endolymph. So there are different forces that acts on the sensory organ while we move our head. First one is inertial force. Like Newton's laws of motion, endolymph wants to stay at its resting position even when the head is on movement. So there is an inertial force acting on the endolymph proportional to the mass of endolymph and cupula. Also, when the cupula is moving, there is an elastic restoring force of the cupula that positions cupula back to its central position after the stimulation. And as I told, endolymph act as a thick oil. There are viscous forces that acts upon the endolymph when it is sliding past the internal wall of the ampulla. And this viscous force is dependent on the speed of the relative movement of endolymph with respect to the wall. See, this girl is rotating, so the direction of movement of body and head is towards this side, but the endolymph tends to remain here. So endolymph is, we can consider that endolymph is moving to the opposite side, and cupula is getting reflected to the side of the endolymph movement, which in turn is transmitted to the hair cells. Now there is a derivation based on integral calculus, that the cupula deflects almost instantaneously upon movement of head, because it is calculated by the basis of the time constant based on the viscosity and mass of the mass and inertia of the endolymph. So it is said that even though there is inertia of the endolymph, the movement or viscous forces along the walls will be adding to that, and there will be a changes. So it is a very big calculation. So if you want, I can do that in another video. So in this, what happens is the cupula is deflected almost instantaneously, and the semicircular canal is considered as an integrator. That is, the inertial force driven acceleration is reduced to velocity. So even though the acceleration is detected by the cupula, what is recorded or what is sensed is only the velocity. So in normal conditions, the head angular accelerations will be very high, so that the time integrator from acceleration to speed limits the deflection of cupula and presumably prevents it from large excursions that may damage the sensory epithelium. To sum up, movements are sensed in the vestibular organ by a rigid coupling of sensory epithelium to bony structure, and fluid-filled system is attached to skull, and inertial forces drive the fluid, and motion of the fluid lags behind any motion of the head, and this relative displacement is a trigger for movement detection. And the final one, to limit the movement of the hair cells triggered by accelerations that drive head movements, the canal system is designed such that deflection of hair cell is proportional to head velocity. You just have to remember that it is not acceleration. The deflection of hair cells is proportional to the head velocity. Natural movements like transient rotations or nodding during walking and all, we won't get nausea because semicircular canal is evolutionarily adapted. But in passive forms of motion such as aeroplanes, merry-go-rounds, it can readily introduce motion sickness because the vestibular apparatus is not adapted to this kind of motion. Another few points which I have to tell about the semicircular canal is that sustained velocity is not longer detected or perceived after approximately 30 seconds. So when you are running or going on a flight, that initial acceleration is detected, but then you feel stabilized after 30 seconds. Also, deceleration will also be detected, but it won't be more than 30 seconds. What happens is during constant speed rotations, when we are rotating for a constant speed, the elastic forces pull the cupola again to its center position. Then what happens when you suddenly stop? Most of you would have experienced this as children when you're rotating, when you're playing that rotating game, and you will be rotating and continuously. When you stop, initially you will feel rotation, then nothing will be there. When you stop, suddenly you will feel that the whole round is rotating. So when there is sudden cessation of rotation, what happens according to Newton law? Endolymph continues to be in a state of motion. So continues to move in the semicircular canal, and there can be an nystagmus that comes in the opposite direction, that is evident for 20 to 30 seconds, and we feel that we are spinning in the opposite direction. But after some time, that nystagmus fades away, and the patient can have a nystagmus in the initial direction itself. That is known as post-rotatory nystagmus. Coming to the most important parts, where the location of the kinocilia and how each canals are stimulated. The horizontal canals. The horizontal canals, the kinocilium of every hair cell is located on the side of the ciliary bundle facing the utricle. So you can see this is the horizontal canal. So the kinocilium is located facing the utricle, and so when a deflection is towards the utricle, that is stereocilia and kinocilium moves towards the utricle, the canal is stimulated. So when the endolymph is moving towards the utricle, the canal is stimulated. So it is excited by an ampulopetal movement. So there is movement towards the ampulla. Endolymph movement towards the ampulla. Ampulopetal movement excites the horizontal canal. What happens when the horizontal canal is excited in the eyes? There is a slow phase of movement towards the opposite. See that my right horizontal canal is excited. There is a slow phase of movement towards the right side and a fast movement towards the right side. Slow movement towards the left side. Sorry, so slow movement is towards the left side, and that's a fast repositioning circuit towards the right side. So the nystagmus is named on based on its fast component. So when the right canal is stimulated, patient will have a right-sided nystagmus. And another thing is right canal is stimulated when the endolymph is flowing towards the ampulla. So right canal is stimulated when the head is turning to this side towards the right side. Right canal is stimulated because when the head is turning to right side, the endolymph will be flowing like this towards the ampulla. So there is deflection of cupula towards the ampulla, and hair cells will be deflected towards the ampulla, ampulopetal deflection. So stereocilia is deflected towards the kinocilium, and there is stimulation of the right canal, right horizontal canal. So when I am rotating my head to the right, right horizontal canal is stimulated, and a slow phase movement towards the left, and a resetting circuit towards the right. So right horizontal canal is stimulated when the head is turned to the right side, and the nystagmus will be to the side of the canal stimulated. And superior and posterior canals, the location is reversed. Like the kinocilium is located opposite. It is not facing the utricle. It is opposite on the opposite side. So what happens is a superior canal is excited by a rotation downwards, downwards and to the side. The and ampulofugal movement. The endolymph has to be moving away from the ampulla. When the endolymph is moving away from the ampulla, there is deflection of the stereocilia towards the kinocilium, and it is stimulated. So the ampulofugal movement, movement of endolymph away from the ampulla, that direction causes stimulation of the superior canal. And in superior and posterior canal, you have a vertical torsional nystagmus. So superior canal is stimulated by looking downward and to the side. So right superior canal is stimulated by looking downward and to the side, and there will be a slow phase of vertical components upward. So I am looking like this. So slow phase of vertical component upward and a fast phase downward. So the nystagmus will be downward. Fast, it is vertical torsional nystagmus to the right side. So right superior canal is stimulated. Fast phase of the nystagmus will be resetting saccade will be downward. Posterior canal is excited by upward rotation and to the side. So there will be a slow nystagmus downward and a resetting saccade upwards. That is also a vertical torsional nystagmus towards the side of the canal stimulated. Coming to otolith organs, the otolith organs hairs are arranged in two bands along the central stripe. I told you previously the central stripe called striaula. This is the central stripe called striaula. So the hair cells are arranged in two bands on the both sides of it, and the kinocilia of hair bundle is oriented towards the striaula. It is so in kinocilia or in utricle it is oriented towards the striaula. It will be towards the striatum in this side, it will be towards the striatum in this side. Here away from the in the saccule it is away from the striatum. So anyway both sides it will be oppositely oriented. So one side when it is stimulated, the other side is inhibited. When the head moves in a particular direction, cilia of the left and right labyrinth move in opposite directions. So action potential increases on one side and decreases on the other side. So this this difference in electrical activity generates motor response to maintain the body's position. See, this is left horizontal. The arrows in this shows the movement of the slow phase. Slow phase. So left canal is stimulated. There is a slow phase towards the right side, and the fast phase will be towards the left side. This is horizontal canal. Left posterior canal stimulation, there will be vertical torsional nystagmus. So torsional nystagmus, the slow phase will be downwards and the fast phase will be upwards. So left superior canal stimulation also, the superior canal stimulation, there will be a slow phase which is upwards and a resetting saccade which is downwards. This happens when canal is normally stimulated, when a canal is excited, that is when the canal is normally functioning and it is stimulated. Macula, you know that macula are sensitive to linear acceleration. So it's the same way as the semicircular canal. There is increased density of the maculae by the otoconia on their surface. This is otoconia. And when the head moves linearly, heavy macula is heavy, so it again has inertia and it lags behind, and it bends the hair cells. Utricle detects lateral tilt and translation of the head. Saccule measures front to back tilt. Saccule measures front to back tilt. Utricle measures lateral tilt, and saccule also measures motion aligned with the pull of gravity. Transduction in macula. Here you can see the plane of horizontal canal and utricle, the anterior semicircular canal, posterior semicircular canal, the horizontal semicircular canal. This is the naso-occipital plane. It is at an angle of 30 degrees. This is the plane of the saccule. So in otolith membrane, each macula contains a small curving depression called striaula. See, this is the striaula in the center. So macular hair cells are oriented relative to striaula. Utricular hair cells are oriented towards the striaula. See, this is the utricle hair cell. So the arrow denotes that both are oriented towards the striaula. Because the and saccular are oriented away from the striaula. The arrow mark shows that it is oriented away from the striaula. Because the striaula curves through the macula, hair cells in otolith organs are polarized in many different directions and are sensitive to a wide variety of head positions and linear accelerations. This is the saccule. It is directed away from the striaula and towards the striaula. In a steady state condition, only 20 to 20% of the transduction channels are open. So at rest, there is minimal firing at rest. So hair bundle displacement in the positive direction, that is bending towards the kinocilium, opens transduction channels. This channel opening decreases the stiffness of hair bundle, which in turn promotes further movement in a positive direction. So that is known as a positive feedback mechanism. So when there is opening of channels, the stiffness of the hair bundle is reduced. This mechanism is known as gating compliance, and this enhances the hair cell sensitivity. So the hair bundle's compliance, like any other biological system, is characterized by non-linear stress strain behavior. That stiffness increases when more tension is exerted on the system, and when channel opening is there, That is small hair bundle displacing the positive direction, channel opening is there and the stiffness is reduced, and it promotes further movement in a positive direction, which is known as positive feedback mechanism. So, but this causes what? There's extreme sensitive hair cells. So we have to prevent saturation. So there has to prevention of saturation of the mechanotransfer response has to be done. So it is a direct, fast process. There is no second messenger molecule. So a unique mechanism is developed. It is known as adaptation. So what happens during adaptation? Adaptation, the transducer sensitivity is maintained, but at the position at which the hair bundle displays maximal sensitivity changes from resting position towards that at which the bundle is displaced with sustained stimulation. So when there is sustained stimulation, you can see that this is the hair bundle and it got displaced like this. So this was normal and a pressure applied and it got displaced like this. So there is sustained displacement to this side. What will happen is the basic sensitivity. So the basic sensitivity which required to displace this displace this thing will shift from this normal to this normal. This becomes the new normal. So that it is adapted. This becomes the new normal, so it won't displace further. So the stimulus response relationship of hair cells shifts in the direction of applied stimulus and causes a return of channel open probability to resting value. So this was resting. It got continuously stimulated. Now this is resting. Now this is stimulated, but this comes to its resting value. So this is different from desensitization because if a second stimulus to this is adapted, and if a second stimulus imposed, like that's a bigger stimulus is imposed during adaptation, the cell will respond again. So it is not desensitization. So in the primary vestibular afferents, adaptation manifests itself as decay in spike rate during sustained head movement. This happens when there is sustained head movement. We are moving continuously. When there is an acceleration or deceleration, that is detected. The vestibular nerve, all vestibular nerve afferents have a spontaneous resting discharge rate. So, as I told in this one, 20% of transduction channels are always open. So, there is a discharge regularity that can be measured by spacing between action potentials of the afferent discharge. So, when there is any problem with the discharge regularity, we can identify that there is a problem with the normal physiological process. There are three types of vestibular nerve afferents identified in mammals based on their response to motion and their innervation profiles. Coming to that, first one is Boughton only afferents, that is bud afferents only. I have in the previous pictures I have shown you type 1 and type 2 hair cells. Type 2 hair cells have Boughton afferents. So Boughton only afferents are exclusive to type 2 hair cells and they are present in the peripheral zones of cristae. Cristae is one saddle shaped, so there is a central zone and peripheral zone. So the Boughton afferents are present in type 2 hair cells at the peripheral zone alone, and these are regularly discharging so they have low rotational sensitivities. Dimorphic afferents. These have calyx endings terminating in type 1 hair cells. Calyx means calyx like ending in type 1, and they have Boughton endings also in type 2. They are present. If they are present in the peripheral zone, it is regularly discharging. If they are present in the central zone, they are irregularly discharging, and these have higher rotational sensitivity. Calyx only afferents are present only in the type 1 hair cells. Type 1 hair cells are mainly present in the central zone. So these are irregularly discharging, and these have high sensitivities at high stimulus rotational frequencies. Low stimulus frequencies, low sensitivity, but high sensitivities at high frequencies. So, an excitatory stimuli has a larger amplitude response than an inhibitory stimuli because already some excitation is there. So, when you give an excitatory stimuli, it goes to a larger amplitude because of the resting discharge rate. Coming to Eval's laws. Eval's law is motion of the eyes and head in the plane of the affected canal. That is horizontal canal is horizontal nystagmus. Vertical canals you get a vertical torsional nystagmus and also in the direction of the endolume flow, ambulopetal or ambulofugal. That is Eval's first law. Eval's second law is excitatory responses are larger than inhibitory one because of the resting discharge rate. That is Eval's second law. Coming to the further central involvement, central processing. First order neuron, we have studied all this dendritic cells, crista ambullaris, macula located in the corpus ganglion, and it goes to the vestibular nerve, brainstem, vestibular nuclei. There are four vestibular nuclei: superior, lateral, medial, and inferior. Superior nucleus is connected with the medial longitudinal fasciculus and nucleus of the 3, 4, 6 cranial nerve and extraocular muscles and mediate the vestibulo-ocular reflex. Vestibulo-ocular reflex, I will be taking a separate video for vestibulo-ocular reflex. The lateral nucleus is concerned, the lateral nucleus has two parts, dorsal and ventral, which forms the lateral and medial vestibulospinal tract, which connects the brainstem to spinal cord and anterior horn cells. And it is the muscles of extremities are connected to the proprioception. It involves in the proprioception, and the representation is somatotopic. Medial nucleus, it has rostral medial nucleus and a caudal medial nucleus. The rostral medial nucleus crosses over to the other side and joins the medial longitudinal fasciculus and helps with the vestibulo-ocular reflex. The caudal nucleus is connected to the cerebellum and the reticular formation of the both sides and autonomic nervous system. So it is mainly causing the vegetative symptoms of vertigo like nausea, vomiting, people have abdominal issues. So all those are caused by because of the connection with the reticular formation and autonomic system, smooth muscles. Inferior nucleus, they cross to opposite side. They also descend in the medial longitudinal fasciculus. Then they also connect with the nucleus of the spinal accessory and anterior horn cells, skeletal muscle, mediate vestibulospinal reflex, and these are primary recipients of vestibular afferents. Coming to vestibular afferent pathways, what all come to the vestibular nuclei? Vestibular nerve, there is cerebellar flocculus and nodulus, cerebellar vermis, axillary optic nuclei, interstitial nuclei. All these contralateral or axillary optic nuclei, interstitial nuclei are all mediated with the vestibulo-ocular reflex, contralateral vestibular nuclei, reticular nuclei, prepositus nucleus, and spinal cord. Efferent connections include to the cerebellum, thalamus, accessory optic nuclei, interstitious nucleus, contralateral vestibular nuclei, reticular nuclei, prepositus, the medial and lateral vestibulospinal tract, and extraocular motor nucleus. Coming to the brain, the insular cortex is a part of the cerebral cortex folded deep within the lateral sulcus, and it is the main role in processing of vestibular signals. The operculum parietal 2 is a histological defined part of the human parietal operculum. In the right hemisphere, it is the core region of human vestibular cortex. Central processes include velocity storage and neural integrator. This I will be discussing in detail when I discuss the vestibular-ocular reflex. The vestibular system also maintains circadian rhythm and cognitive function. So there is direct projection of the vestibular nuclei to the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and there is a processing of the visual, vestibular, proprioceptive inputs. The information is heavily weighted by other factors such as our learning, memory, the drugs we take, aging, and environmental conditions. Concluding with another concept in physics, Einstein's equivalence principle tells that no single physical device can distinguish gravity from linear acceleration. So our otoliths are detecting gravity. So this is the picture when the head is moving, head is tilted backwards. Or when the head is accelerating forward also, the otoconia lags behind and there is a tilt of the hair cells to both sides. But otoconia will show, otoconia and the utricle and saccule otoliths will only show that there is tilt of the hair cell towards the side. And how will the brain identify whether it is a tilt or it is an acceleration forward or a linear acceleration? So the otolith organ sends the sum of all acceleration acting on the head and interpret the signal to initiate postural and eye reflexes mediated by the vestibular nuclei. So we need signals from the eyes, signal from the limb, trunk, neck muscles, via the vestibulospinal tract and vestibulo-ocular reflex to understand if it is gravity or acceleration. So the interplay of several senses at the same time enables central nervous system to cope up with the ambiguity of linear acceleration, enabling humans to distinguish tilt from linear translation under normal conditions. In darkness, what happens in darkness? We don't have vestibular cues. So it is said that there is an internal model of head orientation in the vestibulocerebellum. Flocculus and nodulus, the vestibular nuclei resolves the ambiguous gravito-inertial cues. That is measured by the graviceptors as well as inputs from the semicircular canals. These are my references. Next video, I will be dealing with vestibulo-ocular reflex, nystagmus, and evaluation of vestibular function. Thank you.